Hi there, this is Mark Schiff for the podcast You Don't Know Schiff. Yeah, I thought I was going to say something else, right? But every time I tell people the name of my podcast, they go, that's great. That's a great name. You Don't Know Schiff. And I'm here with Will Benjamin. There you go. You see? I know.
You had to go through your Rolodex of names.
I know. No, I'll never forget you. As long as I live, I'll never forget you. And today we have, and I've said it before, a very special guest, but we have not only a special guest, somebody I've known for years. So I bumped into David Fuhrer at a comedy show, Fighting Back Anti-Semitism. And we were sitting in the theater and we started talking, and I realized we got to have this guy on the podcast. He is so interesting. He holds the world record for the Guinness Book of World Record. Not just his world record. He's the fastest backward speaker in the world. And You'll find out what that's about. And he is a toy inventor and has arguably the most successful toy ever invented.
Yeah, he invented the Nerf Vortex Football, which has been around for 30 plus years and still a huge success. I'm sure a lot of people listening have had that toy or bought it for somebody else. So it's pretty incredible.
And what's incredible is even though he's an inventor, and we have this stereotype that inventors are like oddball, strange, locked in their basements, inventing things and not being able to deal with human beings. This is not the case. This guy is one of the most accessible, interesting, outward, and dynamic when he comes to explaining what he's doing. He's so excited about it.
It comes out in the interview, but some component of his success is his ability to connect with people and communicate with the various levels of people at toy companies and distributors and all that stuff. So yeah, a really great guy. And in addition to the Nerf Vortex Football, he's invented and licensed hundreds of toys in excess of $1 billion in toy sales. So it's pretty incredible. He's a very nice and interesting guy. And this was a great interview. And we hope everybody enjoys.
And even if you're not interested in inventing of toys, he's filled with wisdom. His father's wisdom, his grandparents' wisdom. His wisdom and the way he explains things can work for anybody that's interested in starting up anything. It's kind of a how to start a business. He found a passion for something, and he's been able to follow this passion for the last 35 years. And one of the questions I asked him, which I'm not going to give you the answer to, is how does a guy 63 years old know what a 4-year-old wants, inventing toys? He answers all these questions. We talk about Shark Tank. He's worked with some of the people on Shark Tank and what happens to the people that are chosen on Shark Tank. He covers a lot of ground. I was fascinated by this conversation.
No, it's great. It's always nice when somebody has a passion for what they do. It's true what they say. When someone really enjoys what they're doing, it's not really work. And he really exudes that. So this was a very enjoyable conversation.
So without any further ado, David Fuhrer. Hi, this is the podcast You Don't Know Schiff. And today we have a special guest, David Fuhrer. And David has a very special talent, which we'll talk about. Is it called backward talking?
You can call it backward talking, or as I say it, knee clap straw cap, which is talking backwards.
There you go. So we'll get into that. And you're an inventor, a toy inventor.
Yes.
You are the first I've ever met. And when I was a child, I wish I had met you then. Anyway, thanks for being here. And I got to be honest, you're definitely much more handsome than either one of us. So, yeah, kudos to you on that one. Because I'm third on the list there. Lo is much more handsome than me, but you're killing it, baby. You are really. Yeah. Now I have to ask you a question. Your last name, and I'm sure people have asked you. How'd that come about? It's spelled the same way as,
As you know. No, we won't. Yes, I'm just glad that my parents didn't name me like Mayan or Hill.
By the way, I was born April 20th. Do you know who was born that day?
I think so.
Okay, Yamach Shemo, Adolf Hitler. So,
so Fuhrer, my family are Hungarian Jews, and then the word means leader in German. So even today, if you go to Germany, you'll see a tour guide might be called a Führer, but obviously everybody knows that for different purposes now. And I'm surprised that my grandparents didn't change the name back after the war, but they didn't. So today,
wow,
I get to try to do good things with the Führer name.
Yeah. There was a documentary on Showtime a couple of years ago with people with the last name Hitler. I don't know if you ever saw this, but there are a group of people that have kept the name, claim they're not fans of the man, but they've gone through their life with the last name Hitler. It's quite extraordinary.
It's awkward at restaurants when you make a
Yeah, when you're working
reservation.
a reservation, that
Yeah.
must be very
Hitler
tough.
party for 80,000, please. Hitler party for 80,000.
So when did your family end up coming to America?
So my grandmother fortunately left Hungary in 1914, came to New York, and the rest of her family sadly were killed during the war in Auschwitz.
Mhm.
But she survived, and so that was it. And my mother's parents were born in the United States, and my father grew up here in New York in the Bronx, and then I grew up in Westchester County, New York.
Wow, moving up like the Jeffersons from the Bronx to Westchester.
Right. That's right.
I was
started
born
out-
in the Bronx.
Me too. Wallace Avenue in the Bronx.
Wallace
went out-
Avenue, very famous. I was born on, I lived on Vise Avenue and
Oh,
Creston and Burnside right off the concourse. In between Fordham Road and Yankee Stadium. I was right in the middle, not too far from the Lowe's Paradise Theater.
It's exactly where my grandmother lived as well.
How long did you live in the Bronx?
I was a baby when we moved to Westchester, to Hartsdale, New York. And so I don't have any memories of living there, but my older brother and sister do.
And what made the folks move to Westchester?
Oh, they were just moving up in the world. And my dad was able to get a loan from another relative to buy a house, which I think at the time cost $14,000.
Right.
And we lived there until I was 17. And then my family moved to Wellesley, Massachusetts. And I finished high school in Wellesley, went on to study at Boston University, and then moved to California in 1987, January of 87, to pursue a job in the entertainment industry.
And what was that job?
I came out and I worked in the mailroom at Triad Artists, which was one of the big talent agencies, which was later acquired by William Morris. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then I was promoted to a desk as an assistant to the head of talent. And I did that for about a year. And then I started my invention business right from there.
Mm-hmm.
So like Mark said, most kids would dream about doing what you do. And so, I assume as a kid, you were big with toys. Is that fair to guess?
I think I was always entrepreneurial as a kid. I was always trying to create new ideas, and I had a lot of business ideas, but I didn't know how to execute. Then it all sort of happened from this. Funny enough, I have this, you mentioned earlier, I have this unusual ability to speak backwards. Actually have a Guinness World Record. And that ability led to my career in the toy business. So what happened was because of this unusual ability, I ended up on the David Letterman show and then the Johnny Carson show. I used to perform an act at summer camp and then at school where I would sing a song backwards, take words from the audience and send them backwards instantly. And then a classmate of mine went on to work for David Letterman and told them about me. And they had me come in for an audition. And the next thing you know, I was booked on the Letterman show.
Wow.
And later made it onto the Tonight Show with Johnny.
I wish I had this talent because of speaking backwards. I'll tell you why. So when I fight with my wife, if I could only say nasty things to her backwards, where she would have no idea what I'm saying, I would feel so free as a human being.
So how did you first know you had that ability? How did that come about?
I don't remember the earliest. When I was very young, I used to call all my friends by their names backwards. And then I would ride around in the car annoying my family by saying signs backwards. And nobody really paid attention. School, people started saying, hey, you can do that pretty quickly. So people took notice at school, but it wasn't until I went to summer camp up in the Adirondack Mountains. And one of my campmates forced me to go on the stage at the camp talent show. And it's a perfect camp talent. Had a completely useless ability, but it entertained people at camp. So I got up on the stage and I sang the national anthem backwards. And then people from the audience started throwing out words and phrases one at a time. And I was able to say them all backwards instantly. And from that moment, I was very famous at camp.
Right.
Sure.
So what's your technique? Are you visualizing it? How are you mechanically doing this?
Yeah, let me give you an example. So either of you pick any word or sentence or read something off your desk or off the wall, and I'll show you how I do it.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Okay, that would be Caesaralapsius, it's Salajarphalacripus.
That's it. That is perfect.
Pick something like a shorter sentence so I can just demonstrate. I'll show you
All right.
sort of the
I've got,
mechanics of it.
what about make way for ducklings?
That would be Ecam Yaw Rough Skinnilcud. All right, make was Ecam, EKAM, or
Mhm.
M-A-E. Way was Yaw. For was Rough, R-O-F, and Ducklings was Skinnilcud.
So how are you able to do that?
When I hear it, I can picture it instantly
Okay.
as if it was written on an imaginary blackboard. And I can just see it, and I see it exactly the way it's spelled. It's not a reversal of sound.
Okay.
Like you said the word, house, I would say S-U-O, E-S-U-O-H, but I wouldn't say like sow. So I say it exactly using forward phonetics,
Mhm.
as if I'm just reading it backwards. But I could do it instantly and pretty much any length.
So do you have a photographic memory?
I would say no, because I don't retain the information.
Okay.
I'm just able to when you do it. And
Visualize it. That's amazing.
but it's funny, I always remember almost every word I've ever said. So if somebody picks
Oh.
something that I haven't heard before, I can do it instantly. But I know in my mind that I've never heard that word before.
So if a doctor or someone would do an MRI of your brain, would it be different than, let's say, a person that can't do this? Is there something that that goes on in there? I don't even know how to ask this question.
And answer the question because it's never been studied medically. It's just something I can do. It's the splinter ability. I mean, I don't have any, learning disabilities, or I also don't have any enhanced ability to speak foreign languages or music or math. It's just this one. That's why I like to refer to it as a kind of useless ability. But I can visualize things, and that's which also carries over into the inventing. It's that I
Mhm.
can picture words, but I can also picture products. And I don't have a lot of artistic ability, but I have the ability to see what I want and be able to communicate it to folks that can build and draw and whatever. So when I create toys, so maybe there is something there, but I don't know.
So as far as your career arc though, so this was a skill you had, you used it in camp, then that was kind of like in the background, and then you
Yeah,
went
so
to
I would do this. Yeah, exactly. It was just this fun thing. And then I would do
Mhm.
it in college when they would have a coffee house, a talent
Uh-huh.
show, do sort of the same act.
Uh-huh.
And a classmate of mine had an entry-level job at NBC after we graduated from Boston University. And she told the folks at Letterman. And the next thing you know, I was flown to New York and I was invited to be on the show.
Mhm.
That led to me breaking the record of being bumped more than any guest in the history of the David Letterman. So they had
Yeah,
me
you
fly
said that. How many times?
6 times. I flew in, they put me in a hotel. They'd take me by limousine over to the studio. I was booked as the last guest and they kept running out of time. And what was great about it was that Letterman then started using me as a joke. Even on nights I
Right.
wasn't there, he'd say, "Well, we have a guy that talks and sings backwards, but he started a fight tonight at the lobby, or started a fire." Audience would roar, and then, of course, I wasn't on the show again. And so he ran with that quite a bit. And this was 1993. I'm sorry, 93 or 83, 83. And then eventually he had me on and he brought me on as the first guest. So I didn't get
Wow.
bumped.
How many times were you on Letterman?
I was on 3 times. So, and then after that, I was invited onto the Tonight Show with Johnny. Letterman had me booked to be on again.
Mhm.
And then Johnny, when he found out that I was booked on the Tonight Show, they canceled my appearance
Oh, wow.
because I was sort of one of his, non-celebrity
Right.
guests, like the Nut Lady or Dr. Ruth,
Right.
where he would have me on, and I was like one of his pet guests. And then once I made it to Johnny, and that was, one of the greatest experiences, most exciting things ever in my life.
Could you kind of walk us through that? What you remember about it?
Yeah, so I was living in Boston, and
Mhm.
the Tonight Show at the time, this was 1995, was the biggest show on television. We didn't have all the channels that we have today. And, Johnny Carson was an icon that I just loved and watched every night. And so they flew me to LA and they put me in I think it was the Hilton Universal. And I went over to the show and I did a pre-interview the day before with one of the producers. And I hadn't met Johnny until the day of the show. And then, yeah, when I was getting in the makeup room, he came in and said hello. And I just, I was very excited. I'd never met a celebrity before growing up in
Right.
New
Right.
York. It was real life Johnny Carson. And then they gave me a dressing room, and down the hall comes Telly Savalas. I remember I was so excited, and there was a card on the door that had my name, and Telly signed it. And then Doc Severinsen, who was the band leader, came and signed it. And then when it was time to go on the show, one of the greatest things happened. I had put all my friends and family, I'd gotten them tickets somehow, and everybody was in the audience. So Carson comes out to do the monologue.
Uh-huh.
And, he's reading off the celebrity guests. And then he says, and David Fuhrer, the backwards talker, is here tonight. And all of a sudden, the audience just goes wild. Because again, my friends and family, and they're telling everybody next to them, oh, my brother's going to be on the show. My cousin's going to be on the show. So Carson stops the monologue and he starts saying, how do you know David Fuhrer? And then he ran with that as a joke. If one of his jokes didn't get a laugh, he would say, well, anyway, David Fuhrer, the backwards talker, is here tonight. The audience. So I got a lot of attention that night. And then finally he brought me out and he kept me on the show for about 14 minutes, which was a long segment.
Long time, yes.
He and Ed McMahon, they worked together to ask me all kinds of funny things. And it was so great because I came off that segment and everybody said, you're so funny. Oh my God, you're so great. You should be an entertainer. But what happened was I really didn't do anything because I'm not an entertainer. Carson was such a master that he made me look funny. If I said something that wasn't funny, he would do one of those looks with his face and the audience would roar, and it made it seem like I said something funny.
Sure.
Yeah, we saw highlights of that on YouTube. So you're being very modest. You were very charismatic and good about that. But we had Paul Reiser on the show as well, and he's a huge Johnny Carson fan, and he says a similar thing that Johnny knows what the guests need, and he fills whatever void. So
it was so intuitive. I couldn't.
Sure.
What's that?
I was on with him like 6 times with Johnny, and it was the greatest sitting across from him. And he's so intuitive and so giving, and he doesn't care where the laugh's coming from, but he was perfect at what he did.
Yeah, and I didn't realize how great he really was until that moment, because I had been on a number of other shows, including Letterman. And Letterman was always kind of funny at my expense rule. Sort of, like, look at this crazy guy who talks back. And he would get a laugh, where Johnny made it seem like I was, the funniest professional comedian ever. And I appreciated that so much because he asked questions as if I said exactly what to ask. He just asked all the right questions. But I remember the moment before I walked out from behind that curtain, and I got so nervous that my lip was quivering. It was literally shaking. And I thought, oh, this is going to be visible on air. And it was the commercial break, and they pulled the curtain back, and Johnny looked over at me and he winked at me and gave me an A-OK, like, I'll take care of you, kid.
That's
wow.
Just walk out and go to what they called home base, which was the seat next to Johnny. And then I sat down, and from there it was like a blur. It was just this one memory. And then getting to fly home to Boston, which is, in some ways a small town compared to LA, and go out at night with my friends, I was suddenly, a wee bit celebrity because I had been on the Tonight Show. And that was just a really wonderful feeling.
Surprised you had to take a plane with that type of action. You could have just flown back yourself.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had the same experience with him when he asked me a question. It was done so classy as opposed to the other talk shows. I had a question that he had, which was set up in advance about my marriage. And rather than just say, so how's it going being married? He said, Mark, I don't really know you that well. And if you don't mind, and you don't think I'm prying, I just want to ask you something about your marriage. And it was such a classy way to bring in that question, as opposed to the way they do it now. They just kind of slug you with it.
They ambush you.
So I agree with you, but please.
And I was going to say another fun thing happened 2 days later. So at the time, Spago Restaurant was the hottest place in town, and it was filled with celebrities. And a classmate of mine, again, from university, was the hostess. So she said, why don't you come to Spago tonight? And I went over with a couple of friends. And when I arrived at the bar was the producer of the Tonight Show, Freddie DeCordova.
Sure.
And he came over and he put his arm around me and he said, you was so great to have you on the show. And he said, guess who's here tonight? Johnny's here. And I had always heard that outside of the show, he was shy, he wasn't friendly, whatnot. And anyway, Freddie brought me over to the table where he was sitting with Sidney Poitier, Michael Caine, and Sean Connery, and his soon-to-be wife, who was sitting there with him. And he brought me over to the table, and Carson proceeded to make fun of me in a great way. He was like, he was speaking gibberish. Funny that I talked backwards and had me demonstrate it. And the whole encounter was probably a minute, 2 minutes at most. And I said goodbye, and it was just such a wonderful moment. He was so nice. And then I remember standing by the valet as he pulled away in his Corvette. He waved to me, and I was like, that was great.
That is one of the greatest stories I've ever heard. Being called over to that table with all those people there. I can only imagine what you were feeling and looking at those faces of every one of them that you knew.
Yeah.
It's an insane story.
It was so exciting for me. It was so exciting.
Johnny used to park that Corvette right outside. It had a little spot that said Johnny Carson on it. And I know that Corvette. And one time as I was going to do the show, I looked in the back there and he had a cassette tape, a box of cassette tapes. It said How to Learn Chinese.
Really?
And that was something that they said he did was because he drove back from Malibu every day, back and forth, and it was a little bit of a ride. So he would learn languages while he was driving.
Oh, wow.
But that's a great story, David. That's an incredible story.
So from there, even after being on the Tonight Show, it sort of wasn't a career at that point. You were
a career, and it never became a career because it was again, I was what they would refer to as a civilian guest, a guy with visual ability. So, but I was getting to go on a bunch of TV shows as a result. So right around that time, I met a game inventor, a guy who I'm still very close with named Mark Ducati. And Mark said to me, he's a wonderful magician. In fact, he's an inventor of magic tricks for professional magicians. And he also creates games. And he said this would be a great marketing hook for a game, to do a game that was based around talking backwards. So I jumped at that opportunity. We worked together. We created a board game. And then at the time, Random House, the publishing company, was in the game business. And they licensed this game, and they sent me on a promotional tour to go on all the talk shows. And they also put me in their TV commercial for the game, which was called Backwords. And it was a game where players would hear a word backwards with a clue, and they would have to shout out the answer forward. Like if I said, it's a 6-letter fruit that begins with B, banana. Banana. You got it, Mark. Banana. Yeah. So that was sort of the theme of the game. And it was moderately successful. I mean, now as a guy who's done a lot of games and a lot of toys, I look back at that and I think, well, the product wasn't very good. But it was such a personal, wonderful experience to take this, what I can refer to as a useless ability, and suddenly I have a product and I'm in a TV commercial. I'm going on a media tour and getting notoriety for this ability. So that, I think back at that time, was such a wonderful time. And that opened up the doors for me to create other products.
I want to step back for a second into the Guinness Book of World Records. So you're the first guest we've ever had on that holds that record. Record. You have it there?
I think yes, I do.
No, please go.
I have it here somewhere.
Okay.
I pull it down, but I don't have it here. I think.
By the way, did you get a picture of yourself on the panel with Johnny?
I sure did.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They would send it to you. Call them right. So, just tell me about this. Tell us about the Guinness Book of World Records. How they gave this to you, who you were competing with, what it meant to you. Did they pay you for it? What's the deal with this?
No, I didn't get paid, but it was. I found that there was a record in the Guinness Book about a guy from England who did Queen's album A Night at the Opera backwards. So my record is a little different than what I usually do. And what I usually do is what we did before. You can pick any word or sentence you can think of, and I can do it backwards instantly. But in this case, I had to break the record of doing Queen's album, A Night at the Opera, the entire album, which was 12,000 something words backwards. And I did it on Entertainment Tonight when I broke the record. And That was, I mean, it was a great experience. You don't get paid anything, but you get a certificate, which I do have here, but it's down in my basement. I can always bring it up if we take a break. Um, and, uh, and you get the record, and, it's just a nice thing to have.
Wow.
That, whatever it costs to get on the subway, as they say, but,
Are
So
people
you're
trying to break that record?
not that I'm aware of. So
So you're still the record holder.
I believe I am still the record holder. Yes.
how much did you surpass the guy that was before you? How does that work?
And I surpassed him by about 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Yeah.
That's a
So,
tremendous.
very, very fast. And I did it only, as I mentioned, on Entertainment Tonight. And the host of that segment was a good friend of mine named John Machida. I don't know if you've heard of John, but John was famous for being the fastest forward talker in the world. And John was in the original FedEx commercial, which some people call the most successful TV commercial in the history of commercials. And he lives here in Los Angeles, and he and I became friends we met at a charity event, and we shared the same page in the Guinness record book. He was world's fastest forward, and I was world's fastest backward. So
So
John
I-
hosted the segment.
As you get older, does talking backwards change at all? Are you slower at it?
No, I'm not slower at it. I think I'm as fast as I've ever been, and I don't practice it. I don't think about it.
Right.
Again, I'll give you another example. Pick a sentence, any sentence.
Come back when you have the right size hat.
Okay. Imakasab na oi ta the higger is ta. Is was size, S-I-Z-E, and hat was ta, T-A-H. So, I can just do it.
So
and
let me ask you, in a
Yes.
song, like let's take me. I think I heard you do "Take Me Out to the Ball Game" from one of the show. So take me out to the ball game, take me out to the park, buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever come back. So there's a rhyme. Things rhyme. When you do something backwards, does it still rhyme?
No, it doesn't. It sounds, like take me out to eat. I'm too old to mad glad attack. I'm too old at crap. Crap is park. It's park. I think I sang that wrong. I think it's actually take me out with the crowd, but I sang it as take me out to the park because I thought those were the words. By the way, just so it doesn't rhyme, but just a quick side story to that. The reason I sang Take Me Out to the Ball Game backwards on the David Letterman show was unexpected. So what actually was planned is I was supposed to sing the Star Spangled Banner backwards. And that week, Roseanne Barr went to a baseball game.
Right,
and
I
kind of
remember.
made fun of the national anthem, and it, became, a viral thing at that time.
Mhm.
Everybody was angry at Roseanne Barr. So when I got to the studio at the
Sure.
Letterman show, they said at the last minute, you can't sing that song and have to pick something else. And I didn't know the words to anything else but Take Me Out to the Ball Game. So that's how that came to be.
That's
Um,
funny.
So
Yeah.
if someone were to speak to you backwards, could you understand it immediately, or do you need to kind of like break it down?
I probably need to break it down a little because everybody would pronounce things differently. Like you might
Right.
say something different than I would say.
Sure.
But sometimes people try to do that with me, and I can generally, they'll say their name or something, right? Like Cram Fix and Lowell Nemajneb. Lowell Benjamin is Lowell Nemajneb. And Cram Fix is Mark Schiff.
It's funny how it sounds like other languages when you do it backwards. Maybe a little
Yes.
Chinese, a little German. It sounds like things we've kind of heard before, similar to
Yeah.
other language.
In fact, at my bar mitzvah, I did part of it backwards. And only the rabbi knew. I got kind of sort of like, Baruch atah Adonai, Hukurav, atah Yanada.
Are you allowed to do that in Judaism? Do it backwards, the same words? I wonder if the rabbis would agree to that.
It's actually, the same
You
thing.
could just say, "Oh, I thought we're supposed to read left to right. My apologies."
Right. Sorry.
That's got to be a question that every question in the world is practically in the Talmud, but that's got to be one that the rabbis were never asked. Is it okay to do my Haftarah backwards? And does it still have the same power and meaning?
Yes, maybe we need to get a group of rabbis together to discuss that from every point of view.
Have you ever met anybody that really understands you, that can interpret?
Oh, but there was an entertainer years ago that went by the name of Professor Backwards. And he used to be on the Ed Sullivan show, and he would get up in front of a blackboard and write things backwards. And there was a joke at the time, I think it was from Johnny Carson, perhaps. And he was sadly, I mean, this is true, he was murdered. And the joke at the time, the sick joke at the time was nobody heard him yelling, "Plah, plah."
Terrible. Or it's the country western thing. If you play the song backwards, they get all their wife back, the kids back, the dog back, and their house back. So
Oh, yeah, that's right. Or if you,
it was that
the nice
old.
thing about watching Jaws backwards is the girl jumps out of the shark.
So going back to the toys, so
Yes.
you had your first toy with the game,
Yeah.
and then how did it go from there?
So then I did another game with John Machida, the fast talker, and it was called
Mhm.
Motor Mouth, and it was a fast talking tongue twister game where you race against the timer, and do like Peter Piper, pickle, 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 pepper, second, pickle, pepper, Peter Piper, pick.
Mhm.
And that game we also licensed to a toy company, and it did reasonably well. And that I decided I'm going to leave my job in the entertainment industry. I was working at the talent agency, and I decided to pursue it full time. I was a young single guy, and I was starting to make a little bit of money. It was not riches, but it was enough to survive. And I started tinkering and working on all kinds of different products. Mostly at the beginning, games and pencil toppers, believe it or not. There was a company out here in California that was looking for innovative pencil toppers. So I'd create like little, mechanical puppets and things that would work on top of the pencil. And every now and then the president of that company would throw a few $1,000s at me to create a product, and that sustained me. And then I got very fortunate because one of the toys I worked on became the best-selling toy football in the world. It's now known as the Nerf Vortex Football.
Mm-hmm.
That story is also, it was an interesting story because I had pitched that product to 23 different companies and was rejected. And it found its place into a big shoebox in my closet and as another failed idea. And then I went I guess it was, I don't remember what year it was. I guess it was around 1991. I went to the Tokyo Toy Fair, and I remember I couldn't afford to go at the time. And my dad used to say to me, if you want to be in this business, you have to go where people go. You have to see innovation all over the world. You have to meet, the heads of all the companies, and everybody goes to Japan for the Tokyo Toy Show as a source of innovation. So he said, find a way to get over there, stay in a hostel, do whatever you have to do. And I did. And I went over there, and there was a boat ride with a dinner that was hosted by a Japanese toy association. And I went on this boat ride, and sitting across from me was this Scottish gentleman named John Barber. And I had never met him before. And he told me he was the president of a small toy company in Northern California called Odds On. And they made a product called the Koosh Ball. I don't know if you guys remember, the Koosh Ball was like a rubber band ball. And as we were talking, he heard I was an inventor, and he said to me, I remember it was a question that in many ways changed my life. And he said in his Scottish accent, is there a product that is great? And I don't care. Everybody has rejected it, but it's great in your heart. He said, that's the one I want to see. And I was thinking, and I said, John, yeah, there is this ball. I know it's great. I've been, I hate as an inventor to say I focus grouped it, but I knew that the kids in my neighborhood loved the product. I loved the product. I knew it was fabulous. It was a ball that you could throw farther than any ball. It was very aerodynamic in its design. And I could never throw a football as a kid. So I created with a partner a football that, could be thrown easily, that it would straighten out when you threw it, and it would go farther than any ball. So I told John about it. And then we flew back to the United States. And 2 days later, he called me up and he said, I want to see that product. I FedExed it to him in Northern California. He called me the next day and he said, we love it. We want to do it. Come up here. So I flew up there, sat at a conference room table with, I think, 4 or 5 guys and a woman who was one of the senior executives. And then we went out in the parking lot, threw the ball, and they made a deal with me. And I had very low expectations. I didn't know what to expect. And they started working on it. And what I was very fortunate about is that instead of trying to take the cost out of it, which a lot of toy companies do, they try to reduce the price so they can get it to Walmart or whatnot. They decided we're going to make this as good as it can be. They put it through wind tunnel tests at Stanford, and then they hired John Elway, who at the time was at the height of his career with the Denver Broncos as a quarterback, and to be the spokesperson for the product. And they shot a TV commercial. They put this thing out, and overnight it was selling like crazy. And I remember I was broke and I was living with a roommate. And I remember that first royalty check coming in, and I was waiting. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm hoping that it's, a few $1,000s to pay the rent. And I opened the envelope, and it was an extraordinary large amount of money at the time. I looked at it and I just couldn't believe it. And I said, oh my gosh, I'm going to stay in this business. I'm not going to survive. So I was figuring out I was going to have to do something else at the time. And that was 1993. And now we're entering its 30th year on the market. Came out in the spring of 93.
And just to give people a sense of how prolific you are, you've invented or licensed hundreds of toys and in excess of $1 billion in sales. So just want to give people some kind of scale of what kind of stuff you're inventing. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I can't believe it. It's mostly been in the toy industry. I've had some infomercial products, and I would say most of the things I work on are not on the market. They're sitting actually right next to me and over there on the shelf. And these are ideas that never saw the light of day. And, but every now and then I've been fortunate. So what I learned early on is that the big toy companies have an infrastructure in place where they they look for invention, they look for innovation, and they have people that are actually inventor liaisons, and they put out wish lists. And so I have to, always research and be very familiar with what the toy companies are looking for. And I try to innovate in categories. And I'm fortunate because, yes, I've sold, we say license instead of sold. License meaning that when you have an invention, the company will enter into what's referred to as a license agreement where they pay a royalty for the idea and for the life of the product. And most products have a life of a year, 6 months, if they see the light of day. And then every now and then, if you're fortunate, you can have something that will last for years. And in this case, I've been fortunate with the Vortex in its 30th year. And I've had a number of other products too.
Two questions about this, the football. Did it change from your original invention when they picked it up, the Scottish people? Was it different?
It changed a little bit.
Was it better?
It's close, in fact. I have somewhere here the original, which I hope to see in the Smithsonian one day. The very original one, before I showed it to them, was quite large. It was a full-size football with a tail. It almost looked like a big javelin. And then as I play tested it, we continued to reduce the size and the weight to try to get what I thought was the optimum size for anybody to throw. And then we did a variety of different designs before I pitched it to them. But yeah, ultimately it's close to what we submitted, but not exactly the same.
Did you license it to them, or did they own it and they just paid you for your time?
I licensed it to them. And they later, so that was a company, as I mentioned, called Odds On. And they licensed it to me. I licensed it to them, in which they pay me a royalty. And then later Hasbro, the big toy company, came in and acquired that company. And then my football became part of the Nerf brand, which is owned by Hasbro. So it's now one of the Nerf footballs.
So have other people, other designers copied this? Are there other type of things just like yours out there?
There's many copies. So we had a design patent, not a utility patent. So anybody that does work with patents, patents are what protect inventors with their ideas, is one of the things that protect them. And some patents are stronger than other patents. So if you have a design patent, people can get around your design patent by making, let's say, the tail a little longer, the ball a little fatter. So we were knocked off like crazy. At the time, I was very upset about it because we couldn't protect it with our design patent. However, what I learned from practical experience is to have, ideally the brand that people want, which is Nerf. So even though there are a lot of them out there now that look very similar, I still have the one that most kids want. Sometimes they'll go to a dollar store and they'll find a cheaper version, your tails break off. I've seen some good ones, but it's still not Nerf. Nerf is the brand that people want.
Is your
And
picture
so-
on the box?
No, thankfully, people may not buy it. Picture is on the box of my newest product, which is a fishing game, which just came out. And I'm surprised they put me on the box, but
What is that?
it's called Real Big Catch. And it's a fishing game. I have it right here. I can grab it.
Yeah,
Should I-
please. This is incredibly interesting and exciting.
So this product, what's interesting about this product, and there's my picture on the box,
Look at you.
is that these fish on the table all look exactly the same. But when you catch it with the rod, they extend, and some are extremely long and some are very short. So there's a wonderful surprise element it's really what I would call a preschool skill and action game with some learning activities. You can measure your fish at the end, and
So you don't know what size fish you're going to catch, like in real life.
size fish. You don't know if it's a big one or if it's a little one. And look quickly from the box. Okay, so both these fish look exactly the same, but if I catch this one with the rod, that's it. But this one is like that.
Wow. Wow.
So the kids take turns catching, and then at the end you measure your fish, and so you get some basic early learning math skills. So that's my
cool.
Real Big Catch.
You mentioned a lot of them don't get made. What's like a percentage? If you invent 10 toys or 100 toys, how many of them actually ever get made?
It's very hard to say because my hit rate is a little better now because I have a
Mhm.
lot more experience and I don't just work on things unless they check off certain boxes. But
Mhm.
I would say it's harder than it's ever been
Mhm.
because the toy companies look at thousands of products every year and they license very few of them. And then the ones that they do license, it's still, what I refer to like a minefield and to get it from the idea to actually to be a success in the market. So if I may license 2 or 3 products a year now. That's it. I mean, if I'm lucky, a good year might be 3 or 4. And out of those, I'm lucky if one of them is success. But I work on perhaps 50. And so it's very hard to say. I always have a number of products in different stages of development, from
Right.
early stage ideas to full works like prototypes.
Do you have a partner, or is this on your own now?
Well, it's on my own, but I would say I collaborate with professional inventors on virtually every product now. And also people come and pitch me kind of like Shark Tank, professionals. And then very selectively, I'll take on a product idea if I think we can license it to a company, if I think it's a great product, if I like the people, and we think it's an opportunity to make business, then I'll get involved and I'll try to add some value with, I do a lot of branding and marketing and packaging, and try to improve the play of the product. So very few things I'm doing on my own now. Almost everything I'm collaborating with somebody.
So a guy like you would not need Shark Tank.
I wouldn't. I actually did some work on Shark Tank for a period of time with one of the judges where I was looking to invest in products. I had a toy company that was backing me. So I worked for a few months and sort of behind the scenes at Shark Tank. But no, I wouldn't. So I go to focus on the major toy companies as my customer, which would be, Mattel, Spin Master, Hasbro, and some of the others. They, as I mentioned earlier, they have that infrastructure in place where they're looking for product. But what I learned is that, they have incredibly talented people who work internally, who are creating amazing toys. So the only way that I can break through that is to come in with something that's truly unique and proprietary that they're not going to get internally. So my so-called secret sauce is that I scour the world for new technologies, for inks, for mechanisms, for compounds, things like doughs or slimes, for just anything, new materials. And then I try to create a toy around that. And usually that toy will solve some everyday problem, ideally for a parent, or enable somebody to do something they can't ordinarily do, like the Vortex, by hitting a tail, you could throw it farther than any ball because it's stabilized. My other most successful product was something called Aqua Doodle, which was a product that you draw with water. So Aqua Doodle became the best-selling preschool activity toy in the world. And it has a pen or stampers and other writing implements that a parent just puts a little bit of water inside. So when a child writes on their skin or on the wall, nothing happens, just a moist tip of water. But when it interacts with this mat, it writes like it's a beautiful, colorful marker or painting. And that was a technology I found in Japan that's called a hydrochromatic ink, which is a water-activated color change. So this big mat that's an Aqua Doodle is impregnated with this hydrochromatic ink. You can't see it. It just looks like a mat. And then, when the water touches it, it comes to life. So that became, again, a very successful product because it solved a problem for parents. It enabled preschoolers to create on a large surface freely without making any mess.
Yes.
And so that's the kind of thing I look for. If I can find a platform of some kind to build a product around, to build a brand around, because the big toy companies don't really want a one-off product. Like I can't go in there with a wonderful new car idea or or a doll. A market. I call those marketing concepts. I have to come in with a true invention, something that solves a problem, ideally, something that has a big target market, a demographic of virtually everybody.
How many do you have to sell for it to be like unbelievably successful? Like you're talking, and is everything in China now?
To take the second part of the question first, I would say most toys are made in China, and because the labor costs. Unless it's something big and bulky, they might make it in Mexico or sometimes in America because shipping is obviously very expensive to ship big and bulky things. But generally speaking, China is where most toys are made. And it's because also the buying offices for the big retailers are also over there in China or in Hong Kong.
So when you're dealing with in China, are you dealing with the Chinese people or are you dealing with Americans or English-speaking people that live over there and are working for the company?
Well, generally speaking, I don't deal with any manufacturing because we just do the product invention. Then we bring it to the big toy company and then they do the manufacturing and the sales and the promotion and so on. Occasionally, when I've made my own products, I have gone over there and I typically work with an English-speaking, usually somebody Chinese who has an office in Hong Kong that acts as an agent for factories. And those people will help you get the products made. They'll vet different factories, identify the best source for your product, what the right cost should be, and then they arrange sort of all the back-end operations of shipping your product to, stores. And
so do you see financial gain when they sell it in China and Germany and Finland and Iceland and Puerto Rico, all these places? Is that part of your deal that worldwide?
Yes. It's so when you make a deal with a big toy manufacturer like a Mattel, it's global. And they're only looking for concepts that they can sell globally. So, if we come in with something and it doesn't have international appeal, I was just dealing with something that was an innovative baseball product and it got rejected eventually because the international folks weren't interested in baseball. But yes, all the deals are global deals. Sometimes they'll, what they call sub-license it. Sometimes there's a distributor that will, sell the product and then they might pay a royalty back to the toy company who in then turn will split it with us. There's a whole bunch of complexities in these deals, but the big toy companies generally have selling offices throughout the world.
Wow.
You seem like you found your way in because of the backwards talking, and then that's sort of what led you to inventing toys. But you seem incredibly passionate about it. So was there a point in which you're like, this is something I'm incredibly passionate about? It seems like a perfect fit for you. Is that fair to say?
I think it is fair to say, like everybody else, we always have dreams that we did something else. I mean, I originally came out to work in entertainment. I wanted to make movies. And I also wanted to be a baseball player growing up. But, there was one reason I didn't play Major League Baseball, not because I didn't have the ability. But so I feel that I have found something that I truly, truly love. And also feel like the beginning of my career, even though I've been doing this now for 35 years. It's funny. I'm
Hmm.
still like, I get so excited about a product idea.
Hmm.
Um, I think because it's entrepreneurial and you're kind of always up to bat and you're hoping that something's going to be successful, it doesn't get old. And also I look for innovation, and it's very, very, very hard to find. It's very hard to find a new technology or a mechanism or something. So when
Hmm.
I find it, I get really excited about it. That being said, it's harder than it's ever been.
Hmm.
There's been a lot of consolidation at retail. So right now we only have two major retailers that sell toys, which is Target and Walmart and Amazon. So when I started out, there were 50 stores that sold toys. So it's much harder to get success because those stores have to carry your product, where Toys R Us used to carry everything and it would get a chance.
Hmm.
Now these stores will buy, something that's heavily promoted, that's a major brand. And so there's much fewer opportunities for inventors to get their products to market.
So in show business, as you get older, you get aged out. They're interested in the young people.
Yeah.
Is it like that in the toys? As you get older, they go, they don't want to hear from an older guy anymore. They want to hear the like. How do you think young as you get older, or does that matter or not?
I think, so I, I don't feel like I'm aging out from the perspective that the companies want innovation wherever it comes from. Where I feel that is now when I go to events at the companies where I don't know anybody and I see that they're way younger than I am. So so much of the business, like any business, is relationships. And I don't have the same kind of relationships that I had where all of us that sort of grew up in the business. A lot of people have left the business now. And I'm now, kind of an older guy in the business. But how do I think young is, I just think young in generally, like that's the way I live. Like I never try to think that I'm old. I mean, I'm still doing a lot of the same things in life, whether it's riding my bike, climbing mountains and doing things. And I try not to be old. I try to maintain that childlike intrinsic quality
So,
and all
but
relevant. I have to, like, I don't dismiss things when I see things are getting hot, like people talking about TikTok or whatever it is. I have to,
Mhm.
I have to know about it. And, I talk to my kids about stuff and, what are they doing? What are they listening to?
But how does a
And
60-year-old guy? I don't know how old you are. Are you in your 60s?
63.
Okay, how's a 63-year-old guy know what a 4-year-old wants?
Ah, I think that basic play patterns don't change. So at the end of the day, kids still play. They like to play with the same kind of things, whether it's a car, a ball, a doll, a gun. These are things kids like. So the play patterns stay the same. What changes is your ability to innovate around a basic play pattern. What can you do with technology or with an ink or whatever it is to still focus on what that basic play pattern is. And it's also a younger business. There's been age compression in the toy industry. So at the age of 5 or 6, kids have now moved on to electronics and video games. So you really have to do two things. You have to either work on younger products like preschool products and understand that market, or try to redefine in my head, what is a toy? Like a toy can be anything that somebody 0 to 16 wants to play with. So recently I had another big hit, thankfully. It was called Twisty Pets. And these were bracelets. Grab a Twisty Pet if I have one here. So these were charm bracelets that bend and twist like a balloon animal and turn it into a character.
Wow, look at this.
And then, but it comes, oops, I didn't do it quite right. But they, and this became a big hit of a collectible bracelet. And it got derailed during the pandemic. But the whole point is that instead of a traditional toy, this was sort of a toyetic fashion statement. And then it goes back to becoming a bracelet by simply pulling that.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
We had videos on YouTube on how to do your Twisty Pet, and we have over 100 million views. And it became a big, so I was just trying to, we're trying to think differently. What
Yeah.
are kids going to want? Whether it's collectible jewelry, whether it's another sports product, because the play patterns stay the same.
What is your process? Like if you come up with an idea, do you start sketching things or putting together like a physical thing? How do you approach that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it starts with, just kind of sorting out an idea, as we say, is only as good as its execution. So it always
Mhm.
starts, I will noodle it out with whoever I'm working on. What is the idea? And then we usually start with sketches. Those sketches quickly become three-dimensional prototypes, and that might go through a number of iterations. But what we try to do is create a proof of principle, as I call it.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to look just like the final product, but it has to work like so we can demonstrate what the concept is.
Mhm.
And then from there, I do fairly elaborate artwork. And nowadays, you can make things, using graphic uh, software that looks like a finished product. And I try to create package artwork, marketing and branding, try to think about what line extensions might be, how this brand can become more than just one product, but can grow into a number of products, how it might look at retail on the shelf. So we might do a rendering with showing the product on the shelf. So, so that's how I'll execute the invention. From there, we set up a meeting with the company to pitch it. And usually that may involve an inventor liaison person or a group of people who sit in a room with marketing and design teams, as well as the inventor liaison. And if they like it, they'll take it on internally for an evaluation. After a reasonable period of time, and what that might be different at different companies, a few weeks, they might offer you an option agreement, which is a little bit of money for them to hold it for a period of time until
Mhm.
they determine whether they're going to go forward. From there, if you're lucky, you get a license agreement where they're now going to go forward with the product and you negotiate a royalty. And usually that royalty is about 5% of the wholesale selling price. So just what that means is if you have a toy that sells for $20 at Walmart, usually the wholesale price is about $10. They'll sell it for about half that. And there's some variations on that depending on a variety of factors. So your royalty will be based on that wholesale $10. So
Mhm.
if it's five, in the case of a $20 product, you'll make approximately 50 cents a unit. And
How
then the whole,
finished is a product? How finished is a product when you bring it in?
well, it's in every case, it's different. It really depends on what we're capable of doing in terms of our ability to make the prototype. I try to make things as finished as possible. I like to refer to it as being idiot proof. What I find is like just like you and me and everybody else, everybody's very busy these days.
Mhm.
And me to cut through the clutter at the big companies and have it rise to the top so that it's going to go to the next step. I like to make it as finished as possible so that there's not too much like, well, it doesn't have to be a bird, it can be a dog,
Mhm.
right? Which is, by the way, one of the things I love about this business. Like sometimes we literally sit around for a long time arguing whether it should be a bird or a dog. And then I say to myself, oh God, thank God I'm doing this for a living. This is fun.
Do
Um,
they occasionally come up with really good ideas when you're in your pitch meeting? The companies like that you alter what you've come in with, and you go, "I never thought of that. That's brilliant."
I mean, I really hope that happens most of the time. There are some very, very good inventor liaison people. Um, some companies, they're not so good. They're more hunter gatherers. They just bring everything in and then you're not there to pitch it. So you have to hope that somehow people are going to
Mhm.
see through. And then you have, some folks at inventor liaison people who are extremely innovative and they come from a design background. They want the inventors to succeed and they will pitch it really well and often improve your idea. Because you need somebody internally selling for you. Because very often they're coming into a meeting where these guys have now gathered a whole bunch of stuff, and now it's going to be looked at in a group meeting, and you're hoping that your product is going to stand out when everything gets dropped.
Mhm.
It's another reason why too, like part of what I've always done in my career is I've tried to focus on building relationships at the very top. It was another piece of advice my dad had given me years ago that there was an industry event that was it was for the Toy Industry Association. They would have an annual event that was at a hotel with golf and tennis and speakers, and it was always attended by the presidents and chairmen of all the companies. And he used to tell me, go to that event, build relationships with those people. And often I've sold products simply because I've gone in at the very top and then it's trickled its way down to the brand groups as opposed to coming in at the bottom, hoping it rises.
Well, they tell you that in
So,
show business, if you're going to pitch something, pitch to someone that can buy it.
exa-
What have you got on the shelf that you know is absolutely brilliant that never saw the light of day? And why did it not?
Oh, interesting. Well, one of the products I have is and I can go get one if you
Yeah,
want.
please.
It's a moldable plush, meaning a stuffed animal. So this is one I try to launch myself. And I did it all wrong. So the idea was I created a moldable fabric and it's infused with a foil. So it's moldable. And what that enabled me to do is to create characters that you can express emotion with. And they also have, Velcro, so you can do crazy things. And this product, I didn't execute right, but I always thought it was a great idea. So I have so many things like that. I have boxes and boxes of what I think are good ideas that are just not quite executed right, or I didn't communicate them right, or they did come out, but maybe the TV commercial was wrong. That's why I like to say when you invent something, it's a minefield.
Mhm.
So you have the idea, the execution of the idea, then you have to hope the company buys the idea. Once they buy it, you have to hope that the buyers at the retail chains like that idea. You have to hope that, the international distributors are going to like that idea. And then when it hits retail, you have to hope it sells. It's like a movie that opens and it's a bomb. So the retailers now are so sophisticated that I've had products we worked on for, 2.5 years. They finally come to market and it hits Walmart's shelf. And Walmart, instead of being, David Fuhrer's wonderful idea, it's number 106324
Right.
that's generating X amount of profit per square inch. And that product will die instantly because they have sophisticated, analysis where they see if the third week of April, they're selling 4 units per store. They project that out to meaning, 18 units in December and it's not good enough. Gone. Boom. It's over. It's marked down. And what you don't want is marked down because then all the other retailers follow. Once Walmart or Target marks something down, it's over. And I've had that happen many, 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 many times.
When you say something went wrong with the execution, is that something what went wrong, or something about it you didn't take?
Sometimes I know it in advance. You don't always know. You're kind of hopeful that you're wrong. But I've learned that when I follow my gut from just doing this for a long time, I'm almost always right in terms of like, as it's happening, of understanding. You can't always control that. And sometimes despite everybody's best efforts, things just don't work. I mean, TV commercials are far less important than they used to be, but it used to be that, you put a commercial on the air. And when I first began, TV commercial would drive a product and they would sell. And then it became, well, if you didn't do the commercial quite right, that product would not sell so well. And then it became meaningless. Now everything is, YouTube and social media. But often it's simply the marketing. It's maybe it's a bad package. Like if you have a game, for example, when you go into a toy store, most games you're just seeing a side panel. You're not seeing the front of the game. You're not seeing that wonderful idea. You're looking at a side panel, and a consumer has to understand it like that. Like you have to walk by and you have to understand that concept of what that game is, where somebody's going to pick it up off the shelf and take a look at it.
When I was a kid growing up, I would see a toy on TV. I tell my parents I want that. Is it still the same thing? The kid has to see it first?
Yeah, but not from TV. So we always refer to that as pester power. You want that kid bothering, a parent or a grandparent, that they have to have that product, and you want it to be relentless. Yes, it still happens. It still happens. You have to just reach kids differently. And that's not my expertise. And that's what, the successful toy companies are finding new ways to reach kids, whether it's through entertainment properties. Like, for example, Spin Master has this incredibly successful product called Paw Patrol, which is, a television show.
My 3-year-old grandchild loves Paw Patrol.
Yeah. And it's integrated throughout the show with product, and they sell the toys. So they're reaching kids that way.
To your point about seeing the box and understanding what the game is or the toy, Are you usually on the same page with the companies, or is there ever a situation where like, no, you guys are portraying this toy incorrectly?
Yeah, I would say both. Um, and I have far less control when it's a big company. If I'm at
Hmm.
Hasbro, Mattel, or Spin Master, again, the big ones,
Hmm.
they have a lot of expertise and they don't want my 2 cents worth. I mean, they like it at the beginning when I pitch
Hmm.
it of what I think because I have experience, but they'll take it the direction that they think is right. And
Right,
often, they know they have a lot more data than I have. Uh,
right,
so I just, rely on the fact that hopefully they're right. But again, I always find that my instincts are better than I thought they were.
right.
Well, I love your respect for these other people in the companies and their knowledge. So that's it's good to hear.
I
When I
don't
was
focus
growing up, we had Etch a Sketch, which was a black and white screen.
still out.
Yeah. So how important is color?
I think it's very important. And if you use the example that you just used of Etch-a-Sketch, Etch-a-Sketch does not sell well today. It still sells. It's a classic product. You know, people of our generation will buy it for their grandchildren if they see it. But compared to other activity toys that are very colorful, like Crayola has all kinds of colorful activity toys where you draw things now. And they're much more successful than Etch-a-Sketch. So I do think color, grabs people's attention and, if you get it right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So if you were mentoring a young toy inventor, a toy maker, what would you advise them? And then do you see the trajectory of the business changing further out?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, like I mentioned, it's tougher than it's ever been. But at
Mhm.
the same time, if you really want to do this, I always say to people, like, don't let that cloud your thinking because
Mm.
when I started, everybody say, "Oh, the business is so tough." But compared to now, like now I'm that guy going, "Oh, it's so tough." But I think you have to get that stuff out of your head, first of all.
Mhm.
The first thing I would tell people is some of the advice I got from my dad, and which was build relationships first. If you really think you want to do this and you think you're going to be good at it, I would probably try to identify where your expertise is. And if you think you need a partner, find a talented partner because collaboration is often the key to success in our business because most people can't do it all. Like often people who are very creative are not necessarily good business people or salespeople, or somebody who can sculpt can't necessarily build a mechanical thing. So collaborate as much as you can. I would say build relationships at the highest level, again, by attending trade show events, reading the trade, websites and magazines, going to Toy Fair and meeting people, visit retail and Amazon, which I do still all the time, at least once a week. And I walk the stores because if you're going to focus on the big toy companies, and that's where you're going to make your money, is
Mhm.
the big ones because of their distribution, their ability to pay royalties, and their promotion. You want to understand their brands. Like if you look
Mhm.
at a company like a Mattel, it's all brand oriented. There's Barbie, there's Hot Wheels. These are brands with multiple products. So
Yeah.
inventors have to create products that might fit under one of their existing brand groups or come in with something that's so unique and incredible that it's going to create its own new brand. But that's much harder than fitting something into an existing brand. So always have the end game in mind. Like before I work on anything now,
Mhm.
when I started, I would work on kind of a pie in the sky idea. And a lot of those are sitting in these boxes here in my office, unsold. Now I won't work on anything unless I have a customer in mind. Like I know where I'm going to pitch it.
Mhm.
So there's a plan of action should it be executed well. So, that's what I would say to somebody young is like really, collaborate, visit retail as much as you can, build relationships, understand your strengths and weaknesses and fill them in by, with this collaboration and have an end game in mind. Don't just work on stuff endlessly. And also don't spend a ton of money on intellectual property. A lot of people get derailed by spending $20,000 on trying to get a patent that doesn't even protect them. They also go to these invention companies that you see advertised on television. And, my personal experience is that the best way to sell your invention, if you don't have these relationships, is to work through an established agent. There are good agents out there that work for free. That's spec, not for free. It's that they'll take a piece. So if they're successful, you're successful.
Right.
But don't go to a company that wants to charge you a whole bunch of money
Sure.
and sell you a bill of goods. 'Cause I can't tell you how many folks have found their way to me to show me an idea, and they've told me they've spent $50,000 on nonsense, honestly.
Right. That's a question I want to ask you. By the way, you should probably write a book of wisdom by your father because you keep bringing him up. All the great things that your family has told you. It's nice. So two young kids, they're 18, 20, 22 years old. They want to become toy inventors. Do you need money to get into this business?
You don't need a lot of money unless you're, planning to take things all the way, for example. So if you have an idea and you want to launch that idea, there's different ways to do it. One way is to do it, I would say on the cheap, which is the way that I've operated, which is you invest whatever it takes to be able to present your product in its most saleable form. And that's a prototype, maybe some artwork and packaging. Maybe it's going to cost you a couple of $1,000s or a few $100s or nothing if you have that ability. And then you present it and you hope that a company will license it and pay you a royalty. The other way to do it is to launch it yourself. And this is, where it requires a lot more money. If you're going to manufacture something, make some inventory, warehouse it, go to trade shows, pitch it, and try to establish a market, and then hope that a big toy company or another kind of company comes in and acquires it. That's how some people make the big money. But it requires a lot more on the upfront is to, build your own brand or market. So, yeah, I think people can do it in any way, shape, or form if you believe in your product idea. And there's also now Kickstarter and things like that, which people, a lot of games have been launched that way.
GoFundMe, right.
So fun starter.
What don't we know about you? What else have you done that we don't know about that excites you, that you're still doing, wish you were doing?
Well, I don't know. I'm a huge Dodger fan, and I hope they win the World Series this year.
Good luck.
I'm working on some interesting. I'm always trying to work on something new that gets me excited. So I'm working on some TV show concepts now. I'm creating some content for some friends that are in that business, and I don't know what's going to happen with it, but I'm excited about it, and I feel like it's something new and different.
Look at this. You've come full circle back in show business.
Yeah, I know, because that's what, like I said, I always wanted to be a director. So what I kind of simplified things down a few years ago. It took me many, many, many years of doing this to figure it out. And one was, I want to work with only people that I really, really like and trust. That's paramount to anything I'm working on. Number two, on the project, whether it's a product or a TV show concept that I really love and that I'm excited about. And then three, that it has a chance to make a lot of money, because most of the time it doesn't. Most things fail or they don't do that well, but at least if I simplify it to those three things, I find that it's not a bad experience. Because if you're working with people you like on some project that you feel strongly about, and then when it doesn't work out, at least you're not going, it was a terrible experience. It was okay. Right. And often it leads to something else. Another door opens. But you have to be able to sustain yourself. Like if you're a creative person and you want to get into inventing like me, maybe you need to have another job and you do this in your spare time until you can have some success. Because even if you sell a product, it might be 2 years before you see any meaningful money from it.
Sure. Where do you do this? Do you go into a basement? Where do you do your thing?
Well, I used to have an office with a big workshop and folks, but now I do it out of my house. So I have a room in the house that with some big tables opened up with products all over them. And I do a lot of it like we're doing right now on Zoom with folks that are in workshops that are building things.
Did your kids get involved? Like, were they excited about what you did when they were growing up?
They didn't get involved in the business. I have an older son who works in private equity in New York, and he's 25. And I have another son who's just graduating college, who may or may not come into the business, but they always enjoyed it until I would take stuff from them. Or often they'd come home and suddenly the voice box is missing from, a character, or the wheels are gone from a car. It's like it's something for a prototype. So they never liked that part of this. But I think from just being around me doing this, they gained some basic business skills, which kind of like now why I love the show Shark Tank, which you mentioned earlier, is that a lot of kids are watching this and they understand a lot about business just from watching the show. And I think my kids had that experience growing up because I'm always, interested in new ideas. I'm always looking and I always send them articles every day about some innovation,
Wow. So when people that go on Shark Tank, are most of them successful once they're picked up by the shark?
I would say no. I would say a lot of the deals that you see on the show never actually happen from my experience. So what happens was that people come on and those sharks have not seen that pitch before. And the pitch might be an hour and 15 minutes long. That's then edited down to the 12 minutes you see on television. But, people are representing something like they have X amount of equity in the company or, their sales or something. And then after a deal is made on the show, they are required to sign an agreement that says that they will pursue any other deals for the next 3 months. I think it's 3 months. And then the Sharks folks will do due diligence around that idea and determine whether or not what was represented on the show is actually accurate and whether that deal will stand. And then often it either falls apart or it gets renegotiated, or in some cases it stands as is, and then it moves forward. And sometimes the sharks get involved just to license it to another company, like an agent, where they collect a royalty. Some of the sharks get a lot of outside business. For example, I know David John, he's got Shark Innovations, which is an outside company, and a lot of entrepreneurs come to him there outside of the show. So, I think it's a great place for people to get exposure, whether or not that deal goes through. They're getting, 12 minutes on network television. And often that can propel them to success right there, even if they don't get a deal.
Well, good. Amazing.
Thank you for sharing the time with us. This was really exciting. It's always fun to talk to someone who loves what they do, so passionate, and you're so successful. So this was
Amazing.
a lot of fun to hear, and a lot of
But
great wisdom.
Well, guys,
absolutely.
I really appreciate your time today, and you guys asked great questions, and I
Thank
love
you.
every minute of it. So I
Same
thank
here.
you so much.
Before you go, I want to give you an opportunity that you weren't allowed to have before. When you weren't allowed to sing the Star Spangled Banner backwards.
Yeah.
I want to give you that opportunity now for us to close this little podcast. Can you sing it backwards for us?
I can. Can I do it sitting down?
Yes,
It's like-
standing. Put your
Maybe
hand
you-
on your heart.
I can do the beginning at least. Oh, yeah, snack white, yeah, it's the one you're ready to go. What's so proudly we toss you dark blue dahlia. That's what so proudly we held. What's after that?
At the twilight's last gleaming.
Tots to higgle salg gnime alg.
Bright stars.
Usa to herbs, Sagirvo strats.
What other song do you know that you could Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star?
Elknut, El-Tool Rats. Elknut is Twinkle Twinkle. Star was El-Tool Rats. Yes.
Can you sing a bunch of it? Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star.
And you
I'll
need to
sing it in English.
You sing it in English word.
Lowell, would you join me? Because you got kids. Twinkle.
But you have the voice of
No, come on, join me, Lowell. Come on. Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how I wonder where you are.
Elknut, El-Tool Rats. Whoa, I read new out what you are.
That's
Excellent.
Great.
So again, you played that backwards, it would not come out forward because I'm reversing the spelling, not the sounds.
Right.
How about when the Beatles, they recorded their stuff, people played it backwards and they heard like Paul is dead. Do you remember that whole
Do
thing?
remember that.
Yeah. So this has been incredible. We always ask a question before the person goes. Lowell, you got that fired up?
Well, I think you answered already. It was about advice. So if there's any other advice you wish that you had had when you were younger that you would share with anyone.
Yeah, I mean, again, the things that I said, and also listen to other people. If you're showing your concept or play testing it, whatever it is, and people are just not liking it, it's not resonating with people, move on. Move on to the next thing. Like, don't so wrapped up in your idea that you don't listen to what others are telling you, because often they're right.
Mhm.
And rework it, do something else, but don't, and get to know the FedEx guy really well, because if you bring in your stuff back, they're gonna get used to that.
Fantastic.
And
David,
if there's any website or social media platform you want to tell people to find you at,
I have a website. It's called BlueSquareInnovations.com. If people want to look on there, BlueSquareInnovations.com.
amazing.
good.
And we'll put that in the show notes as well.
And
Yeah, again, can't
if I
thank
had
you
to go
enough.
out and buy one toy for my 3-year-old and my 10-month-old, my 2 grandkids, I got a 3-year-old and we got a little girl that's turning 1. What 2 toys should I buy?
Well, of course, the Vortex Football from Nerf, that would be one. And then the new Aqua Doodle, which is about to come out for the 1-year-old. It's perfect. It's a preschool. It's the first time. That's what's so beautiful about Aqua Doodle, is it's the first time that a small child holds a pen in their hand in many
Wow.
cases.
And when's that coming out?
Well, it's coming out later this year, in late 2023. Aqua Doodle was on the market for 17 years, been off the market for 4, and it's coming out all brand new with a lot of innovation at the end of 2023.
Cannot wait to get it for her.
Be the perfect age for it around the holidays.
I cannot wait to get it for her. And thank God for Christmas, even though you're a Jew. Thank God for Christmas, because otherwise she'd be borrowing money from me. So there you
I
go.
don't get one for free. But I see you.
Good deal.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Take care.
Okay, that was David Fuhrer. And we're back now. I'm here with Lowell. And wow. I was blown away by David's interview about his backward talking, about inventing toys. I found it so fascinating, so interesting. The wisdom, the things he said that his father said to him that helped him put this mega business together. It was just fascinating. And it reminded me of my early days in stand-up comedy. I had this passion to follow this thing, and I've been doing it for like 40 years, and I'm still passionate about it. Same with him. He somehow was tapped on the shoulder with this passion to invent toys. And he was on the Johnny Carson show as the world's fastest backward talker. He was on the Letterman show. How it happened, he gets to explain it. It's so interesting. And I just loved every minute of this conversation, Lo.
Another interesting thing about it was that he's so passionate about his work, but that wasn't his original passion. So he set out one way and then had these opportunities open up. And then he went in the direction of inventing toys, and that became his passion. So it's always interesting, different people's career paths. Some people find something when they're young and they won't veer from it, they stick with it. In his case, he took the turn, and now he's incredibly passionate about what he does. So it's a very inspirational story.
I wish that I had this podcast to listen to 40 years ago, because I would have made less mistakes in my own career.
Mhm.
Because it fits any career. He talks about the things you need to do and places you need to go. This guy's been inventing toys for 35 years. You know what he does? Once a week, he goes to the toy stores and sees what's new on the shelves.
Yeah.
He goes from toy store to toy store. Very interesting. He talked about when you go to a toy store, all you see is the side of the box. You don't see the whole box because there's no room on the shelf for all these big, wide boxes. So you
Yeah.
better have something grip you on the side of the box that's interesting enough for the kid to go, Mom, I want that. Dad, I want that.
Yeah. And it was an interesting parallel because we had Phil Rosenthal on recently, and he was explaining with the sitcom and a pilot, there's so many places where it could fall off a cliff. Even if it's a perfect show, if the casting is wrong or anything goes wrong, there's so many ways it can fail. And it's very similar with a toy. You can have this amazing toy, put in the perfect drawings, invention, everything. And then if the marketing goes wrong or if sales go bad at Walmart in week 1, that's it.
I
Again,
just had that conversation with Seinfeld recently. We were on the road and we were talking about his show. And he knows it's not just because Larry and Jerry were there. So many things had to fall into place. I mean, they're
Yeah.
brilliant at what they do. They put together arguably the best sitcom ever in history.
Yep.
But so many other things had to fall perfectly in place for this thing to continue on.
Yeah, I think even with them, right? There was, after the first few episodes, it didn't rate well, but they had an executive who was pushing for them.
The first
And if
season
not
didn't go well.
Yeah, if not for that person, then this otherwise amazing series
That was
wouldn't
Rick
have.
Ludwin.
Rick Ledwin. Well,
And he was the
thanks to
nighttime.
Rick Ledwin.
He was in charge of nighttime TV, and he had some extra money, and he put it to the Seinfeld show because he so believed in it. But yeah, so many things have to fall in place.
Yeah. So it's interesting in so many fields that's true. And again, he talks about how many toys he's invented and still invents.
Hundreds and hundreds of
never
toys.
happened. Yeah. So that's a great lesson in endurance and stick-to-itiveness.
Phenomenal. So I hope you enjoyed the episode as much as I did, as much as Lowell did, and more to come.
Thank you. That was David Fuhrer on You Don't Know Schiff. And please follow us on Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this, and spread the word. Let people know we're out there. We'd appreciate it. Thank
Shalom.
you.